Long days, pleasant nights, and welcome to Kingslingers, a Doof Media podcast journeying through Stephen King's Dark Tower series and beyond. I am your host, Constant Reader Scott Daly, and joining me, as always, is Matt Goddamn Freeman. Pardon my French if you're a religious man. How's it going today, Matt?
Beep, beep, beep.
I stepped on your line there. I'm sorry. That's the most beepable beep beep.
It's exactly. I don't have to say anything else. That's all I have to say. I don't quite know what it means yet, but
what do you mean you don't know what it means? You see it in this, they just say beep beep every time he starts. Technically, if you were paying close attention, Bev already did that to him once. I think she just said beep Richie earlier.
I guess I wasn't paying close attention.
Yeah, I guess you're not doing close reading.
See, I was waiting for the book to explain it to me. You mean I'm supposed to be picking stuff up from context?
Yeah.
Oh shit.
This week on the show, our 19-part coverage of Stephen King's It continues with part 7. We're already 7 parts in, Matt. I can't believe it. We're going to be covering chapter 10 with the June of 1958 in the rear view. We head back to 1985 as the Adult Losers Club gathers for their very special reunion. Matt, what did you think of this week's reading?
This is fun. This is different from a lot of the recent weeks. This is one of the rare times we haven't had any kids. Although there's a sort of a metaphysical presence of the kids, you could say. And I always love this scene, which is the characters finally come together. The quartet is finally united or reunited, as the case may be, and it's the Council of Elrond scene is what it is, right?
Yep.
And King, I'm sure as he was writing this scene, was thinking about that, and I love it. I really enjoyed this chapter.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think when I think about this section of the book, part 3, grown-ups, the thing I mostly think about is the next chapter, the one that we're going to be covering next week, chapter 11. But this is really good table setting stuff. This is really good. There's quite a bit of plot here, and that is necessary every once in a while in books. But there's a lot of exactly what you said, getting the characters together, explaining kind of the plan going forward. It is kind of delightful to me, Matt, that this is, and I know, I guess this is technically true in Lord of the Rings as well, how far into the book the Council of Elrond is. This is a 520 pages into the book, roughly, and we're finally having this scene. So it's like the structure of this book just delights me because it's so different. It's so different. Like, we've had so little plot. I don't know. I just love it.
Yeah, I think we'll have some opportunity today actually to talk about some of the choices that King has made regarding pacing. Because I think it works really well that this scene falls where it does. And I think that King is letting stuff spread out smartly to make the book feel like it's really well paced. It works for me.
Yeah, I agree. It's going to be a great conversation. But before we get into it, Matt, we do have one very special thing to talk about today. Everyone, listen up. This is important. We've been kind of talking about this behind the scenes for a little bit now, and we're ready to finally talk about it. So, Matt, I don't know if you remember, but a few months ago, we talked about how it's always been our plan that at the end of this season of our show, we are going to make a journey together up to Bangor, Maine, and spend some time up there, visiting Stephen King's haunts. We talked about doing it after the end of season 2, and then we realized that no, we can't go to Derry until Matt has read the Derry novel It, so we're going to have to do it then. So we've been kind of talking about this behind the scenes for a bit, and we recently have been actually making some real plans towards it, and we're excited to announce some of those plans for y'all here today. So Matt, can you I guess, what are we doing? Can you give a brief summary of what we're doing?
Well, not only are me and Scott going to Bangor June 14th to 15th of 2024, So a bit less than a year from now. But we're inviting um, all of you,
Everybody.
or whichever of you want to come, I guess. So there will be a link in the show notes that give you the full details of what exactly we know at this point, and there are still some things that are up in the air at this point in time. But basically, what we're going to do is we're going to hold a benefit for the Bangor Public Library, and it's going to be take the form of essentially a live Kingslingers podcast
Yep.
with you, dear listener, in the audience, if you want to come. There's a bunch of other cool details that are kind of still in flux behind the scenes, but we will have some more announcements in that regard to you as soon as we can settle them down. In the meantime, if you follow that link to the survey in the show notes, you can see some of the options that are going to be available. And the purpose of the survey, Scott, do you want to go into the nature of the survey?
Yeah, sure. So like Matt said, the only thing we have like definite at this point is the date. It's going to be June 14th and 15th. Everything else is still in flux, and the reason everything else is still in flux is because we want a little information from you folks on what how many people would to be expecting. So the purpose of the survey is for you guys to see the details of all the different levels of ticket we're having, and the different things that you get for each level, and how much the tentative prices for each of them, and to fill out if it's something you would be interested in doing and at what level, and just to get an idea from people on how big we can expect this, because we want to, we talked about this I think a couple months ago, that the one big thing for us is we don't want to plan something super 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 big and then only a few people can come, and we don't want to plan something super tiny and then a bunch of people want to come and it's a mess. So that right now we are in the information gathering phase of this whole thing, so we have some plans out there, and we want to know what people's reactions to them are. So as Matt said, the link to that survey is in the show notes. You can also just go to www.doofmedia.com/Bangor survey, all one word. That's BANGORSURVEY, and it will send you to a Google form where you can fill out the survey. Please do so. That is the big thing here. It's an announcement, but it's also a call to action, right, Matt?
Yeah,
Please, if you're at all interested, please go to that link and fill out that survey. The more respondents we get, the more we're able to gauge, what we need to do, what we need to plan. It's very exciting. There's a lot of cool things going on behind the scenes right now. We've got some sponsors lined up. We have a potential guest that might be coming to the actual live event recording. I can't announce who that is yet, but we'll let you know as soon as we can. I can say it's not Stephen King. I
yeah,
just want to be. I just want to be.
yeah,
I don't want anyone to ever think that we're leading you on that we have Stephen King. No, not going to happen. But I think that it's a guest that people really will enjoy, especially Dark Tower fans. So, I'm really excited about this, Matt.
oh
I
yeah,
think it's going to be really great. We had a couple of our listeners approach us to kind of help us. They had an amazing plan that they had already started working towards before they brought it to us, and we were just blown away by it and said yes, let's do it. So we are working very closely with them to make something amazing, awesome. There's going to be merch. There's going to be tours. It's gonna be really cool. So
yeah.
I, I'm
I,
so
I
excited.
I think one thing we should say is SK Tours of Maine is sponsoring um, the events,
Yeah,
that which is extremely cool of them to do. So
yeah,
they're covering a lot of things for us so that this can work more easily for everybody, and
yeah.
that's just incredibly awesome of them. Yeah, thanks SK Tours of Maine.
Yeah, and we will be, oh my gosh, we will be talking about them and about this whole experience throughout the next few weeks for sure. But right now, what we would like you folks to do is go to that link, fill out that Google form, and give us some data. We need some data. We need to know how many people are interested in this. So please head there right now, doofmedia.com/Bangor survey, to give an added incentive for you folks to make sure you fill out that survey. We are going to be giving away 3 copies of Stephen King's new novel, Holly. Basically, you fill out that survey, you are entered into a raffle. We are going to randomly pick one person from that raffle, and then we'll reach out and contact you and ship you a copy of the book. Obviously, we don't get like early release copies of the book, so it will have to be after the novel is already out in shelves. But hey, you'll save $20 or so
Yeah,
on your copy of Stephen King's Holly. So everyone is entered, even if you're only going to the survey to say no, I'm not interested in coming. You will still be entered in the drawing, but hopefully we don't get just a bunch of people saying no. Please fill that survey out. We will be reminding you again and again throughout the next few weeks. The survey, we're leaving it open until September 15th, just to make sure we get the most amount of time possible for everyone to fill it out. So once again, doofmedia.com/Bangor survey. The link is in the show notes here. Go there, fill it out, let us know if you're interested. And if you want to come, get excited, because I think this is going to be really cool.
that's right. And just to reiterate, we're giving away 3 copies of that book, so your odds of winning a copy are not too shabby, actually.
Yeah, definitely.
All right,
Definitely.
cool.
So it's exciting. We're going to be helping out the Bangor Public Library, as Matt said, and we're going to have a great time doing it. So, all right, Matt, we got to start planning what we're going to talk about in that live episode, though.
Yeah, we'll just wing it, right?
Yeah, totally.
It's like we always
That's what
do.
we do every week. Yeah.
Right.
Speaking of winging it, let's move on and get into this week's episode. Matt, we are beginning a new part this week. We have moved away from part 2, June of 1958, and we are now in part 3, Grown-ups. And with every part, there are poems. So we have a new poem here, another entry from William Carlos Williams' epic series of poems called Patterson. This one is an excerpt from his poem within that long poem called The Descent. I'm not going to read it here, Matt, but I found this really fascinating, because I think my understanding of the poem The Descent is this was a poem that was written near the end of William Carlos Williams' life. I think he had a heart attack and a stroke and was not doing very well health wise. And he's writing about the descent into old age, the descent into your own mortality, and comparing it to the ascent, to the being a young kid, experiencing that thing. And I don't know, there was something sad about this, but something hopeful as well. What did you think of this little excerpt of poem?
Yeah, it's interesting. It does, as you say, seem to be finding something kind of bittersweet
Yeah.
about the process of aging, not just purely bitter. I do also think it's really interesting how we've got all these William Carlos Williams uh, poetry snippets, but they're all from different poems, or they're not all from different poems, I guess, but many of them are from different poems.
Hmm.
And I don't really know anything about William Carlos Williams, honestly, but whatever it is, King seems to be finding almost like a through line through his works, and using that through line to emphasize the stuff that he wants to say in his book here. And I think
Yeah.
that's a pretty fun application of these quotations.
I agree. I think, we talk about these poems a lot, and we try to dive into and the meaning of them and all these things. I really honestly do feel that while King is pulling meaning, and it's obvious that we're switching into this section of the book about the kids as grown-ups, that selecting a piece from a poem about aging and about mortality and about these things makes a lot of sense. But I also I feel like he picks most of this stuff just on vibe. I really do.
Hmm.
Like I feel like sometimes he's not as interested in the specific details of what the poem literally means, or what even that section of the poem means, but just a feeling it creates. And that I love this feeling. Like, I'll read this part here. The descent, made up of despairs and without accomplishment, realizes a new awakening, which is a reversal of despair. That's a beautiful
Hmm.
thing. This idea that you're ending, you're starting a new phase of your life, and it is a descent. It is, you have reached the top of the hill, you are over the hill and on your way down. But that has a new awakening as part of it.
Yeah,
There is despair as part of that descent, but not just despair.
yeah, it goes without saying that the word choice of a poet is going to be perfect. But I love the last line of this block. a descent follows, endless and indestructible, referring to the descent itself as being indestructible.
Yeah.
Just is quite a interesting twist on kind of the usual way you would parse that.
Yeah, and I tried to capture it here in the copy of the poem itself in our notes. But this poem also has a very specific structure. The way William Carlos Williams uses indentation
Mhm.
makes the poem itself seem like a series of stairs going
Mhm.
down. And that's really effective too. I love this poem. I love the snippet, and I went out and read the whole poem, and I really really loved it. I suggest people go out, just go search William Carlos Williams, The Descent. You'll see the entire poem. Really really beautiful stuff.
Cool.
The other quote here is from a song by Joe South. Not too much to say here, Matt. Don't it make you want to go home now?
Yeah, that
Um,
this one seems kinda straightforward.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I feel like he always does that, right? He always has like, this is a really deep, layered thing that's a poet expressing some cornerstone of human existence, and then also, I like this song, and it's
Yeah,
about going home.
right. Here's a rock song I like that I maybe was listening to while writing, perhaps.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, yeah, I guess the one thing about it is the line, "All God's children get weary when they roam," which is kind of it feels like something, out of The Stand or The Dark Tower or something, just
yeah.
tonally. I don't know.
I agree, and I do think there's also something, and I think that this chapter gets into this a little bit. There's something that all these people's lives had been missing. You know, like it's not to say they weren't happy. Obviously, they were successful, right? But we talked about this a little bit during the six phone calls chapter. They all seemed a little bit sad, missing a little bit something that it almost feels like, and I think this is true, that these 27 years they've just kind of been in kind of a holding pattern in their lives. Like they were
Yeah.
going through the motions and they were doing the things, but like kind of waiting for this moment, waiting for the circle closing.
Yeah, as a personally as a character who is roughly their age, I can can kind of empathize with that feeling. It's very easy to be like, man, where did the time go? And
Yeah,
feel like you've been in a holding pattern. I do kind of think that this book is about being in your late 30s and
yeah,
kind of being like, wow, I'm like well into my life, and I kind of still feel like I'm that kid when I was 11.
yeah.
And yet I kind of don't in some ways. And isn't that interesting? I mean, you could say that whole chapter is this whole chapter is about that because Bill keeps sort of seeing this almost superimposed modern versus old Derry. And I think it's a metaphor for the way that we see ourselves.
I agree with that, and I really like this. You know, we talked kind of about like the decision to make the kids 11, and how that was like that was like this liminal state on the cusp of moving into going through puberty and starting to head towards adulthood. It is really interesting here that on the flip side of this, we have all of our characters who are 37, 38 years old now, right?
Mhm.
They are not 40. They are not middle aged yet, but they're right there. They're right on that cusp of moving into middle age, and it just so happens that you and I are right there as well. And it is this. It feels like an intentional choice that both of these characters in both time frames are on the verge of moving into this new phase of their life,
Yeah,
and they're going to have to go through something pretty significant before they're able to get there.
that's interesting. I didn't quite think of it as being on the cusp of middle age, but yeah, I think I'm just in denial about that fact. But
Well,
yeah, you're
Matt, I
right.
mean, 40 is over the hill.
These are
So
just words, Scott.
I remember my father's 40th birthday.
Uh-huh.
I remember just being like, "Wow, you're so old." And it's only a couple years away now.
Scott, I will never grow old. I will never die. You know this.
It's true. It's true. We'll talk in 10 years, buddy.
Okay.
All right, let's get into chapter 10, The Reunion. As we said, we are back in 1985 with author extraordinaire Bill Denbrough. I just wanted to note here for you and for anyone else that's audiobooking and not reading this book, we're out of the italics now. In the previous section, every part of the book that took place in 1985 was italicized, and then when we transitioned from that back to 58, the text straightened itself. Here now in this section, we are properly in this time with this character. We are this is the part of the story we are telling now, and so the text is just normal.
Hmm. Yeah, I think it reinforces what you indicated last time, that the real story is these people's time in Derry, um, being spiritually connected to each other in their quartet. Their lives as independent adults was a kind of dream. Uh, there, there's almost less reality to it. So
Mm.
I think it feels right that, you know, while we're not temporally in sync with the kids' story, we are spiritually, metaphysically in sync with the kid's story. So it makes sense.
Yeah, I love that. Just the idea that they're in Derry now, and so the text
Hmm.
is no longer that italicized, dream-like, removed text. It's just they're back in Derry, and so that's this is home. This is where they belong.
Yep.
Yeah, no, I love that. So Bill is asleep in his hotel room, and he awakens from his slumber to the phone ringing. And I love that, like almost immediately in this chapter, King is establishing a really important motif of this chapter, and perhaps this entire section. We'll see, but this important distinction between being an adult and being a child, and the adult and child version of these characters. This line right here is really great. If it had stopped ringing just then, he would have slipped back down into sleep without a hitch. He would have done it as simply and easily as he had once slipped down the snow-covered hills in McCarran Park on his flexible flyer. You ran with the sled, threw yourself onto it, and down you went, seemingly at the speed of sound. You couldn't do that as a grown-up. It racked the hell out of your balls. So that's, I mean, pretty obvious meaning there right now. Like this, here's a thing that a kid could do. I can't do that anymore.
Yeah, and it's interesting because it's of course showing the adult being more fragile than the child, in contrast to our usual expectation that adults are stronger and more capable at
Hmm.
almost everything. Not everything, of course, but here's certainly one thing. Throwing your body through space or jumping without looking onto something is definitely something that a child can usually get away with, and an adult cannot.
Definitely, yeah. So Mike is on the phone there to tell Bill he's arranged a reunion of sorts at a restaurant called Jade of the Orient. He also lets Bill know that Stan is dead, but doesn't want to give the details just yet, not until they all get together on what Bill refers to as quote unquote neutral ground, which is an interesting sentiment there, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. I guess at the time I assumed like, oh, okay, there's something about this restaurant that is special maybe, and they're going to be protected, they're going to, nothing's going to happen. And then we kind of see that's not really true, because they are um in some sense attacked while they're at the restaurant. I acknowledge that it's just sort of a scare. Nothing really comes after them at the restaurant, but um, I just wonder why he said it was neutral ground if they weren't, really protected. Um,
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to overthink this too much. I really think just because it's not part of Old Derry, it is part of New Derry,
I see.
and um, it is not like I think there's this really the very very end of this chapter says the reunion is over and now the work can begin, and the work is them revisiting key parts of Old Derry, right? So like
Mm,
it would have been an entirely different thing if they had decided to have their first big reunion in the Barrens, let's say. That would have been opening themselves up to going back to childhood immediately. Whereas this is a place where, in preparation of beginning this work, they can go and not really have to worry about that. And you're right, they do get messed with by Pennywise, but it is ultimately rather tame compared to the things he's done to them in the past.
mhm. Yeah, it's an interesting thought that it's old dairy versus newer dairy. I mean, dairy, Pennywise has been around for, I don't know, like a century. I don't off the top of my head remember the first sort of Pennywise event,
Hmm.
but it does seem like Yeah, sure. I'll go with that. We'll go with that for now until I can sort
Okay.
through the actual, because what I mean by that is I'm always kind of trying to sort through, like, where does Pennywise come from, or what is his source of power. I mean, he's obviously associated with the water and the drains and the sewer, um, but why and how, and who's Bob Gray, and these questions are always kind of bouncing around. So I'm kind of trying to fit the puzzle pieces into the puzzle as we go.
Sure. Yeah. No, that's great. That's great. I really enjoy it.
Right.
So Bill dials a cab to head over to the Jade of the Orient, and we get our first real look at Derry in 1985. It's important to note here, Matt, that we've talked about small town Stephen King a lot, but Derry, at least Derry in 1985, isn't really a small town. It's a city. And this is also where I will remind you and our listeners that this isn't the first time we've seen the modern city of Derry. We spent quite some time here with our good friend Ralph, the Insomniac Finger Pistol Man.
Yeah, yeah. That's fun. I do have to say that Insomnia is such a different tone of a story that I just don't I don't visualize the town that Ralph Roberts was in as being the same town that Bill is currently in. It's
Sure.
like my mental picture is just a different picture.
Yeah. Well, and Ralph's story takes place years after this one, right? It takes
Mhm,
place in the
mhm.
90s.
Sure.
Although it is fun to think that somewhere around here, Ralph is wandering right now as Bill drives by in his cab.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's totally fair. It does not feel like the Derry that we're introduced to in the opening of this book. Certainly not. And there might be a reason for that. I think I was kind of hesitant in bringing this up, really, because if you, I don't know how good your memory of Insomnia is, but we do get like information about what happens to Derry in the 80s in that book. And I don't know how much you remember it. I don't want to like tell it to you again. But technically, what happens to Derry.
God, this is such a blessing that my memory is good enough to cover, like, exactly whatever book we're currently talking about, and then just erases afterward. I just reformat the hard drive after every book.
That's perfect. Yeah.
So I don't quite I vaguely remember that there is, like, a thing to remember, but I I don't
Hmm.
remember what it is.
Yeah. Well, we'll get there. We'll get there.
All right.
So there's a lot to this chapter, Matt, about how much Derry has changed in the years Bill has seen it. And I think this is a very relatable, a lot of this is this very relatable you can never go home again feeling that I think that pretty much anyone has probably experienced in their lives, right? This idea that you go home and like all these buildings that you grew up with have been replaced. In Bill's case, all the old Main Street buildings have been replaced by banks. There's these beautiful theaters that have been knocked down and replaced by parking lots. It's this very real feeling that I know you and I have experienced specifically with our college rather.
Yeah. Yeah, recently, within the last, summer, I think I mentioned this earlier that, I went back to our mutual alma mater, and, they had changed so many things, and, I appreciated 0 of the changes. Um, I very much vibed with what Bill is feeling here, where it's like, um, all of the changes are, as Bill says here, dull
Yeah,
change.
yeah.
It's always to remove the charm, and whatever is added is not beautiful. Um, it was depressing, to be quite honest.
Yeah, I mean, I love that's a experience that both you and I have shared. I don't think I've been back to our school as recently as you have, but even the times I went back, it just is remarkable how much it changes. And I mean, it's kind of an interesting thing, right? Because I was only there 5 years. I know you were there longer, but that's really a drop in the bucket for a place, and yet like it's such an important moment in our lives that it's cemented in our lives as this is the way it was, this is the way it always was, and this is the way it always should be, and that's just not how anything works.
Mhm.
Because our time there was tiny, really insignificant, really, and
Yeah, I guess. I
and
mean, it's funny. I was there for probably closer to 10 years. because I went to graduate school. In case people are like, "Why did Matt take 10 years to finish
No, Matt's
college?"
really dumb, so he
Yeah,
just takes a long time.
yeah, exactly. That's true too. But but no. So like I do see that as a place where I spent a lot of time. Like a quarter of my life now, basically, and so it feels a certain way to see that it's changed. It's like, oh wow, that place, like I will never, let me put it this way, like I will never again go for a walk across that campus. Oh, I could go for a walk across the campus, but it wouldn't be the same walk, right?
Sure.
It would be a different walk. So in that sense, that part of my life is just over, and it can never be accessed again. And that's kind of a sad thought when you think about it that way.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, that is how Bill feels about it, which is interesting, right? Like Derry wasn't a place that he had good memories, right? It wasn't a place of happy memories for Bill. He had some really, really traumatic things happen here. And yet, like, he is saddened by the loss of something. Like I love the writing here. And just a feeling that Derry was cold, that Derry was hard, that Derry didn't give much of a shit if any of them lived or died, and certainly not if they triumphed over Pennywise the clown. Derry folk had lived with Pennywise in all his guises for a long time, and maybe in some mad way they had even come to understand him, to like him, need him, love him? Maybe. Yes, maybe that too. So why this dismay? Perhaps only because it seemed such a dull change somehow, which is the part you had already talked about. But I love this idea that this place sucked. It was cold. It was hard. It was awful. We established this in the first pages of this book, how shitty this place is. And yet, this is the power of nostalgia. This is the power of a place being important to you in your childhood and then coming back to it and seeing those changes. It's part of it. It's part of life.
Do you ever sit back from the present moment that you're in and try to feel for that moment the nostalgia that you'll inevitably feel toward it later?
I
It's
have, yes. I
impossible,
know
of course.
exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, I feel like that must be a human universal, and of course, you fail to do so because you can't really know what nostalgia is going to do, how it's going
Yeah.
to sepia tone this exact moment that you're in. But you can almost be assured that it will. It will happen.
Hmm.
If only we could live our lives with that with that view of the present moment. Think how different it would be.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because there are definitely moments in your life where you can like step back and be like, "This is going to be a thing I remember." Right? Like I remember like doing high school graduation and then like celebrating with my family, going back to my house, and then like saying, "Okay, mom, I'm gonna go party with my friends tonight now." And I
Mhm,
just remember leaving my house to go hang out with my friends and celebrate graduating and being like, "This is it."
mhm.
This is one of the most important moments of my life, actually. I remember that feeling, but I think some of those, the interesting thing about it, some of those remembering your nostalgia moments are things that you've since forgotten, right?
Mhm.
Like
Yeah, absolutely.
you were wrong. You were wrong that would be some important nostalgic moment, and so you just don't remember it anymore.
Yeah, no, I totally agree that there are ones that even as you say that, I'm like, yeah, I can remember the last day of high school. I can remember getting off the bus and thinking this is the last time I'm ever going to get off of a school bus.
Yeah.
Um, or actually, I wouldn't have been on a school bus on the last day of high school. I had a car by then. What the hell? So who knows what that memory was? Who knows what that
Well, that's the
hallucination.
the fallibility of memory right there. That
Well,
yeah,
I
it's
had some
perfect.
some kind of memory that was like, this is the last time I'm getting off of a school bus for some reason. But it's very funny to me now that I'm realizing that it can't have been what I thought it was,
Hmm.
which gives the lie to the idea that I remember these important moments. But anyway, yeah, no, there's probably also ones that I've just totally forgotten. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's fascinating stuff. I mean, and it's so much of the flavor and the mood of this is this kind of push and pull between I don't want to be here, but also I'm here and it's sad that it's not the same anymore.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
So as Bill is traveling and having all these experiences, there's one person that's helping define all these experiences, and that is his cab driver, who is just we've talked about this character in the past, or this type of character at least. This is one of those just classic one note Stephen King characters who don't matter at all, but who leave an imprint on you. And pardon my French if you're a religious man, cab driver is certainly one of those for me. I
Uh-huh.
love it's it almost borderlines on the absurd a little bit here, like
Uh-huh.
how often he uses that phrase in the 6 pages he and Bill are together,
Uh-huh.
but it just works. It just works. I
Yeah.
can't even explain why.
Yeah, it's funny. You know, you feel like this could be a real person out there, right? I've every once in a while you meet somebody who's just got like a really weird thing about him, like this, and
Hmm.
yet they're not like a terribly maladjusted person. They just have the one kind of tick or whatever it is. And other than that, maybe they're incredibly charming. They just have that one thing, and you're like, how is why are you doing that? But of course, you don't say that because that would be super rude.
Yeah.
Um, of course, Bill does point it out, which is kind of funny. In the scene, he repeats it back to him. Yeah,
My-
no, I love him. I love these guys. I kind of love how the audiobook reader does it, where he just keeps throwing it in as an afterthought in the same tone, as if it's not weird that he's saying it over and over. It's great.
I think my favorite part of it is when Bill says "I am" in the response to
Uh-huh.
if you're a religious man, and his response is, "Well, then get out of my cab and go to fucking church" or something like
Yeah,
that. It's just a perfect response, like he was saving it for if someone says that, and he
yeah,
just
yeah,
rips. Yeah, what a delightful character! I really
yeah,
love him.
yeah. Me too.
So we talked about this already, but I really love King kind of putting to words this feeling that you have over visiting old places that have changed. This doubling sensation we get here. Bill felt a queer doubling sensation in his mind, the sort of sensation he remembered getting the first time he watched a 3D movie, trying to bring two images that didn't quite jibe. You could fool your eyes and your brain into doing that trick, he remembered, but you were apt to end up with a whopper of a headache. And he could feel his own headache coming on now. New Derry, fine, but the old Derry was still here, like the wooden home hospital building. The old Derry was mostly buried under all that new construction, but your eye was somehow dragged helplessly back to look at it, to look for it. I love that idea, right?
Yeah,
That it's new, it's duller, but still underneath, it's there. And if you squint, if you cross your eyes, you can see it.
yeah. I mean, not to keep harping on the nostalgia train here, but I was thinking like, yeah, this is a perfect description of driving around our old college town and feeling like the place where we sort of grew up was like buried, or
Hmm.
like you could see glimpses of it between the cracks, or it's like, oh, it's behind that building is and it's
Yeah,
like, well, no, it's not there anymore. It's replaced by this, but your
yeah.
brain almost can't accept that.
Yeah. One of the like probably most important places to my childhood was my grandparents' home in
Mhm,
a place called Kingston, New York, in the Hudson River Valley. They we when I lived in New Jersey, we would go up over the summer and we would just hang out for like a month at my grandparents' house. And because all my family lived in that area, and eventually my grandparents passed away. My uncles and my mother sold the land, and there's a Dunkin' Donuts there now. And you go back, and like obviously it looks not alike at all because there's a Dunkin' Donuts there now. But then also there's like the little hill at the back of it that we used to ride a tricycle down. There's little bits and pieces, a row of bushes, or
mhm.
where the driveway intersects the road, and like there's little bits and pieces where you can kind of still see the building as it was, but now it's Dunkin' Donuts.
Mhm.
um, and it's just this really weird, incredibly true thing that I think happens.
Yep. Totally.
One thing I think that is cool to point out here, though, is because of the structure of the book, the way King structured the book, we meet the characters as adults, then we flash back to them as children, then we're moving forward with them as adults as they come into Derry. We're seeing these places again, too. Like, it's not just the characters feeling this nostalgia. When Bill sees that the Aladdin theater has managed to survive, thanks largely to Mike, uh, we learn it's not just the Aladdin, right? It's the place where Ben and Bev and Richie saw Teen Werewolf and scored their first victory against the bullies. The place where Ben got to sit next to Bev and was really uncomfortable. King made these places matter for the characters, but for us too. And so we get a little bit of that feeling that Bill has here.
Mhm. Yeah, I agree. That's very clever. Very clever to have done that. Yeah.
Hmm.
Um, yeah. I think you know, changing the town is another way of forgetting by erasing the places associated with those memories, right? So
Mm-hmm.
if you take away the place that triggered the association, you kind of make the association more difficult to reach. And so changing the town is sort of a form of town-wide amnesia, you could say, um, erasing memory, erasing history, which I think is relevant in a book that's largely about the idea of the importance of the past, the importance of remembering. It's a book where amnesia and forgetting is a crucial plot point, obviously.
Hmm.
And so I just I like the idea that we're textually slash subtextually extending that to the idea of the changing of the town being a form of losing memory, but it's like a physical memory.
Yeah, and I think it might reflect Derry's kind of desire to move on
Hmm.
and away, right? Like this idea that the town tears down the old main street and puts up a bunch of banks, and it's because we don't want to think about the old main street. We don't want to think about those things,
Hmm.
as we're about to get to the Kitchener Ironworks, this horrible explosion that killed a bunch of children on Easter Sunday. What's there now? It's a mall.
Hmm.
And this is actually really great because this is the mid '80s, like to I feel like it was like mid '80s to mid '90s where it was like the rise of mall culture
Hmm.
as this huge thing. And I love that the Derry itself kind of represents that with the building of this giant mall over this horrible old exploded ironworks disaster.
Yeah, yeah, that's really interesting. Now I'm thinking about malls and how I'm kind of I feel like malls were like a third place that we had that we've now lost, and now we don't have a third place. Isn't that sad? You
Yeah.
know what you know what I mean?
No, I do. I mean, it's yeah, like it was such a big deal. The mall,
Yeah, yeah.
and we
I
still
know
have.
I was just gonna say, I know I sound silly, but malls were important to our teenagehood, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It was a place to hang out. It was a place to get away from your parents while also simultaneously like getting to go. There was
Yeah,
usually a movie theater next to or attached to the mall, so you could
yeah,
go to the movies. That like yeah.
yeah. I feel bad for kid. Maybe that's what's wrong with the kids these days. They don't
No
have good
malls.
malls. Yeah.
I love this quote as well, Matt. It says, "The mall was the reality, not the memories." But somehow he didn't believe that. I love that idea, right?
Yeah.
That like my memories of this thing aren't what's real, aren't what counts. And it's like, no. Actually, in this situation, it definitely is.
Yeah. Well, again, I think Pennywise and the evil of the town is associated with the old stuff that's been either
Yeah.
torn down or buried, and it's like, well, just by tearing down the buildings, you want to forget about it, but you can't get rid of it. Pennywise is still there under the surface, underneath everything. I mean, that's that. I think that's why it metaphorically makes the most sense for Pennywise to be associated with like the drainage system and the sewage and all that, because it's like, yeah, it doesn't matter how many layers of civilization and veneer you build on top of the city.
Mm-hmm.
The 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 the, the drain is always the drain.
Yep.
You just bury it deeper, and that doesn't make it any less powerful.
I agree. Your shit always has to go somewhere, right? No matter
Hmm.
what.
Yep.
And yeah,
Yep.
yeah. No, that's definitely true.
Yep.
So finally, Bill gets to the Jade of the Orient and meets Mike out front. This is another thing I thought of when reading this week that I think is a really interesting structural choice here. Mike and Bill, and frankly, Mike and any of the Losers Club haven't met as kids yet. Like we in the June of 1958 section, Mike is not part of the group yet.
Hmm.
And so here we have Mike and Bill here in this moment being reunited. They're part of the reunion. And yet Mike feels separate because we haven't seen the club formed with him in it yet.
Hmm.
Um, it's really interesting. And I think there is the book is doing a lot of work to show how Mike is different and Mike is separate. We're going to talk about it in a bit, but he's the lighthouse keeper. He's the one that stayed behind. He's not the one that had a successful life. He is apart. He's part of them, but apart from them at the same time.
Hmm. Yeah, I totally agree. It's really an interesting choice to sequence things this way. I don't know that I'll have kind of the full picture of what we're doing and why we're doing it until we do meet Mike in kid form, because and by we I mean, but when the characters finally meet Mike in his kid form, that'll the context of that meeting will help me understand why we did things that way. But I guess I'm looking forward to that moment.
Yeah, definitely. I do think this is like the type of thing where you wonder if these are the decisions that happen as you're trying to formulate how everything's going to lay out, right? You're like, oh, when should Mike meet the rest of the group? Like maybe in an earlier version in his head he met them earlier, but no, we want to show Mike as different. So let's hold off on that introduction, and then especially in this scene, it really enhances Mike's separateness from the rest of them.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like King has intentionally sort of given us a lot of slippage between the two timelines, as opposed to maybe what you might expect, where it's like the two timelines are kind of operating in this narrative lockstep, where you're 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 getting point A in the kid story before you're getting to point A in the adult story. It's like, no, you'll catch up later, and then maybe one of them gives you some information before you get it on the other thread, and that's been actually the norm, I would say.
Yeah.
And that's a cool way of doing it, 'cause I think it kind of keeps you on your toes, not quite sure um, which one is like the present, you could say. Um, you know what I mean? Like the story.
Hmm.
I guess I slightly feel like the kid story is the present and the adult story is the future, which is usually backwards of how stories like this are told. Usually
Hmm.
the
Hmm.
usually the adults are the present, and the kid story is the adults in the present remembering the past. Um, but even me saying that the kids are the present and the adults are the future isn't ironclad. I don't feel that strongly. That's just kind of my current vibe. Um,
Sure. I think we've spent like real estate wise, we've spent more time with them as children than as
mhm,
adults,
mhm.
and that probably helps reinforce that idea. Yeah.
Makes sense. Yeah.
So Bill looks at Mike and he's at first shocked by his old age, and then we get this. He smiled then, and the smile lit his face. In it, Bill saw the boy he had known 27 years ago, as the old wood frame home hospital had been overwhelmed with modern glass and cinder block. So had the boy that Bill had known been overwhelmed with the inevitable accessories of adulthood. There were wrinkles on his forehead. Lines had grooved themselves from the corner of his mouth nearly to his chin, and his hair was graying on both sides above the ears. But as the old hospital, although overwhelmed, was still there, still visible, so was the boy Bill had known.
Mm,
I love this. I
yeah.
love the idea describing an adult as overwhelmed with the inevitable accessories of adulthood. That's a delightful turn of phrase to me.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel that.
Me too.
I
Me too.
I also think the text is, emphasizing that Mike looks older than he maybe should,
Yeah.
as if living in Derry with the weight of the knowledge that he's carried and the memory of it has aged him prematurely. That seems pretty clear from this.
Yeah. No, I think you're right there. And that is part of the shock of seeing him. And I think this idea is true of all our characters, right? This idea, and I think this is true of people, right? That there is, obviously you see someone you haven't seen before, and I think we've talked about this on the show before, and we see it when the Losers Club gets together for the first time. This idea that it is very, very easy, despite the changes and despite the time, to slip back into the rhythm that you had with that person when you knew them when you were young.
Mhm,
And that is because that young person is still in there somewhere, and that's the same thing as we're seeing with Mike here.
mhm, yeah, yeah.
So the hostess comes to escort them back to the rest of the group, and I nothing to say here other than I love this little little Dark Tower bit here where the hostess says, "You are well met in friendship," I think, which is just a very specific turn of phrase, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, it's very Midworldian, very,
Mm-hmm.
Tolkienian, you could say. I
Yeah.
love it. Yeah.
Yeah. So Bill walks through the door and gets to look at the rest of his old friends. And as we were just talking about, I love this moment where he first sees them all as they were as children, not the people they are today. He sees them as kids first, and then the illusion is eventually broken, and we get to see each of them through Bill's eyes. We've seen these characters, we've seen the adult version of these characters, but we've not seen them through another person's eyes, really. And so we get to see Richie glassesless with an expensive suit, Bev beautiful and vibrant, her hair still as bright as it was, Eddie prematurely lined, and Anthony Perkins like. Which, side note, is that a dig on him?
Um, I don't know. I don't
So
know.
Anthony Perkins is the actor who played Norman Bates in Psycho. So I don't. I mean, no shade on Anthony Perkins. I don't know if that's a good thing to say someone's Anthony Perkins like.
Yeah. I'm not honestly sure what exactly I'm supposed to take away from that. Also, I didn't know off the top of my head that's who Anthony Perkins was, so I think I just
Okay.
was like, "Okay, sure."
I
Um,
think I'm pretty confident in saying that's the role he was most
yeah.
famous for.
Yeah. I mean,
Um,
I just looked up a picture of him, and I don't recognize him from anything else other than Psycho, so,
yeah.
um,
And of course, the most importantly, the biggest change though is Ben, skinny, svelte, Ben.
yeah.
Um, but then we get this, and oh god, we got to talk about this, Matt. It was one of the strangest moments Bill Denbrough had ever passed in his life. Stan was not here, but a seventh had come nonetheless. Here in this private restaurant dining room, Bill felt its presence so fully that it was almost personified, but not as an old man with a white robe with a scythe on his shoulder. It was the white spot on the map which lay between 1958 and 1985, an area an explorer might have called the Great Don't Know. Bill wondered what exactly was there. So there's another presence here, Matt.
Mhm.
What is it?
It's this absence, this passing of time.
It's
Um,
time.
it's
Yeah.
it's time. I mean, I think it's really interesting that it's it's not an old man in a white robe with a scythe on his shoulder. I just thought that was interesting because normally it's a black robe.
Is
Jack
father I thought Father Time was white robe. Um
Father Time. I don't really know I don't have a good association for Father Time. Does Father Time have a scythe?
yeah, he
Okay,
does.
okay, then you're just right about this. Gotcha. Okay, um,
Yeah, I mean this is the passage of time that feels so acute and specific to him in this moment that he personifies it as we'll see here like assumed memories, right? Like he
mhm,
sees these characters in college, like he's filling in the blanks of all the things, all the experiences that must have happened in between this time. This really interesting experience that like I don't know if I've ever felt it as like specific and acute as Bill
yeah.
does here, but like I
Well,
don't know, just like you see people you haven't seen in a long time, and like it's not that you know what happened to them in that intervening time, but it's a feeling that
yeah,
stuff did happen to them, that they've lived life
yeah.
between the time you knew each other.
Well, so Scott, you may or may not know this, but I just went to my 20-year high school reunion recently. Um, uh, and I
No, I don't
yeah,
believe it.
yeah, it was within the last few weeks actually. Um, and and I very much experienced this, where it's like you're talking to a friend that you haven't talked to in forever. You were really close, maybe. I mean, I'm speaking personally. I was really close with some of these people, and I'm like, wow, I know you, and yet like I can really tell that you've been through some shit, and also like what one funny thing is like I can tell by the way I'm talking to them, like I'm not at all the person I was, but they can probably see the old me, but they can
Mhm.
probably also see the shadow of the things that have happened to me since then,
Yeah.
and they don't know what that is. They don't know where that comes from. It would take
Yeah,
days for me to even bring them up to a cursory understanding of
sure.
you know, and that's it's a really strange and singular moment to meet up with people you haven't seen in a super long time.
Yeah, I love that. I think I'll kind of try to rephrase what you just said there. This idea that, with Bill's strange doubling sensation, you look in front of a person and you see the person they are now, and if you squint or you look around the corner, you can see the person they were then. But there's another thing there, right? There's the person they were in all moments in between those two times,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
that presence is there, right? It's there in them because it's the thing that transitioned them from that one thing to that one thing you're seeing now, and it's this real thing, that I think, we're playing in magic a little bit here, so we're accentuating it and making it more literal, and I love that concept though. I absolutely love it.
Yeah, me too. Um I think I love it more so because I experienced something that resonated with this so strongly that it feels like, oh wow, this is just really nailing something to the page that
Hmm.
is very real, and very, I don't know, heavy and important feeling.
Yeah, but time is not the only presence that they feel, because Bill Bill senses something else too. Suddenly, that it was the seventh, that it and time were somehow interchangeable, that it wore all their faces as well as the thousand others which it had terrified and killed, and the idea that it might be them was somehow the most frightening idea of all. How much of us was left behind here, he thought with sudden rising terror. How much of us never left the drains and the sewers where it lived and where it fed? Is that why we forgot? Because part of each of us never had any future, never grew, never left Derry? Is that why? Ugh. Ugh. Well, that writing.
Yeah,
It's incredible.
I love it. It's I don't know how literally to take Bill here, but regardless, I love the idea of it. It's really interesting, really evocative.
Yeah, yeah, there's just this feeling that, like we said, that this trauma so defined their lives that it's part of everything they've experienced. That even the passage of time is somehow linked to Pennywise, to it,
Hmm.
to to the more broad it that we've been talking about. Not specific to it, the monster, but it, childhood, it, trauma, it, uh, the trials and tribulations of your life, are
The Yeah,
interwoven with the passage of time.
yeah, the deep past, and all of the accumulated pain of that. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, powerful moment.
yeah,
Love it so
yeah,
much.
yeah. Me too.
So the silence is finally broken, though, by, as usual, Mr. Richie Tozier. He breaks it with a joke, and then suddenly the Losers Club is back together again. This is that moment that we were talking about, that moment where you see a person you haven't seen in forever, and there is that moment of, oh, this is kind of weird, it's unsettling, and then it's very easy to just slip back into that old relationship, that old friendship. And that's what we see here. There's this moment of
Hmm.
awkwardness, this moment of terror on Bill's part. But then they just slide back into that friendship.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Richie makes one of his classic jokes, the first of many. I mean, and I find this to resonate as being true. Also, I mean, like the when you're hanging out with your friends you haven't seen in a super long time. Some maybe you're a little nervous, maybe you're a little apprehensive of like, are we still going to get along? And then that nervousness feeds into a stiffness, and maybe you feel like, God, this is awkward. This is not what I was hoping it would be. And then somebody crosses that line. They make that absolutely inappropriate joke that an adult should absolutely not make, and everybody laughs. And you see that's the laugh I remember. That's my friend. And then it's like it resets everything,
Hmm.
and that's
Hmm.
actually a very true thing. And I think on the level of metaphor, it's like the laughter, the humor, the love. These are the things that actually bind us together, and the sooner you can bring that out, the better. And that's something the book, harps on, is the
Yeah,
idea that
yeah,
we even when we were terrified, we were laughing, is what Bev said last week, right?
yeah. Yeah, no, you're right. You're right. Great moment. So from here, they all catch each other up on their lives. It is interesting. The one thing that stood out to me here that I wanted to comment on, that Bev, who said in her chapter that this was the last time she was going to lie about Tom, that lying about Tom is done. She lies about Tom here as she catches them up on her lives. She gives her quote unquote wonderful man all the credit for her success in her career, saying it wasn't her, it was him, it was his vision, it was his drive, his business savvy that made her this incredibly successful fashion designer. And it's like, Bev,
Yeah.
fuck.
Did this make you incredibly angry as well?
Yeah, uh-huh.
Yeah. Right. I mean, so it's, I guess, where we are right now is we're seeing that Bev's promise was strong enough to bring her back to Derry, even if that required this massive battle with Tom to get here. But it seemingly wasn't strong enough to break this psychological dependency on the idea of Tom. And that's, I don't know. It tells us where we are in her arc, I guess, because she's not past Tom by any means.
Yeah.
She got away from Tom temporarily, you could say, and it remains to be seen whether she's really free of Tom. The
Yeah.
story has not told us like, oh, okay, good. The Tom thing is behind us now. That's just definitely not the case.
Yeah, yeah, and that's feels realistic, right? It
Yeah,
would kind of be absurd to say that this one moment was enough to just cure her of this issue. Of course
right.
not. Part of going back to Derry is to confront this issue, the origin of this particular issue. So it is very in line with her that she would continue this obvious bullshit that on some level she knows is not true, but
Yep.
she does it.
Yep.
So from here, the conversation moves to the most changed member of the Losers Club, Ben, because he's lost a whole bunch of weight, and we finally get to hear the full story of how this happened. We see here that King creates kind of a male version of the Carrie shower scene here, where a bunch of asshole bullies start chasing him around the shower and continue to slap him on the gut and really torture him. But it wasn't the boys doing that really spurred him on to lose the weight. It was the coach who stood there for some time and watched it happen before stepping in. And then, after stepping in, didn't comfort Ben, but chastised him, but told him he sickened him, disgusted him. And Ben used his hatred for this awful man to motivate himself, to start working out, to start eating better, and it was because of this that he lost all the weight. A pretty remarkable story, actually.
Yeah, it's a really interesting story. I was gonna say I enjoyed it. It's like, yeah, I enjoyed it, but also it's harrowing in some
Sure.
regards.
Yeah.
I I do think it's interesting that we get this rather lengthy and detailed story from Ben. And maybe I think I had an expectation in my mind that all these other characters would sort of catch us up on things that had happened in the intervening years. That doesn't really happen. It's almost just Ben tells us this story to explain how he lost the weight, and then we don't get a ton of details from the other characters. I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, no, you're right. I mean, this is definitely the focus. We get a little bit like Richie tells us a story from his life, but not really related to the catching up factor. But this just seems like a thing that like is the obvious. We have to get this out of the way first because look at you, you're half of what you were, right?
Yeah, right.
I did the other part of the story I was really fascinated about is we talked about Ben's mother as part of his problem, and I liked the parts of this whole weight loss journey of his that it was about his mother and about his mother's like strong resistance to the idea that Ben's trying to do this. I think that the thing, she's this single mother that's working really hard to put food on the table, and to her a measure of success was that her son got to eat a lot, that had plenty to eat. Is like, look at all this food, look at all I'm doing my job, I'm doing it. And Ben's refusal of that food to her was a rejection of everything she's working towards. And I love that his solution to this ended up being, oh, I read in a book that turns out you could eat green vegetables all you want and pretty much not gain anything. So I just said, just start feeding me salads. And it worked that like she got over her issue and it allowed him to continue dieting. And this just feels like this very real and accurate depiction of how a child like has to navigate around a parent's neuroses a little bit, because
Mhm.
it's like he's not going to be able to change her fully, right?
Mhm.
But he can come to a solution that allows him to do what he wants to do while not completely destroying her psychologically as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. It's more it's more about a kind of clever compromise and finding a middle path rather than some kind of crushing victory. I mean, the crushing victory is that he does beat the you know beat all the other runners in the track meet, right? And he gets to have his moral victory there, I guess, and that's very satisfying.
Hmm, hmm.
So yeah, that's it's really interesting. I'm wondering how how and whether this element of Ben's character continues to kind of weave through the narrative and the theme as we go. The idea that you have this thing about yourself that was um, really holding you back and hurting you as a person, and then you changed it willingly, right? I guess
Yeah,
I say that because a lot of the change so far has been depicted as like you know either like something good has been lost or something bad has been buried but not actually dealt with. And it's like this is one of the few cases where it's like, well, he didn't like that he was overweight and he lost the weight and now
yeah,
he's trim and it's good, and like there's no, like it doesn't feel like there's some kind of cloud hanging over this that's like
yeah.
it's bad somehow. It's just it's one of the few times that has happened in the story. So I guess I feel like it's important to dwell in it just a little bit.
No, I think this is a really, really smart point, actually. You look at these other characters, Bev married her father in a lot of ways.
Hmm.
And we talked about this when those characters were introduced. Eddie married his mother. Um, I think Bill is still clearly suffering and is channeling through his writing the trauma he faced around the death of his brother and his
Mm.
parents kind of isolating themselves from him. um, Stan is dead.
Hmm.
Richie is kind of an anomaly, but we've seen here, is kind of very miserable and pretending to be all these people, has gotten, as we see, very good at doing these voices and pretending to do these things, and so
Yeah.
that's more of a extrapolation of the person he was as a kid. So Ben in that definition, in that framing, is very different. Like this is the primary thing he was suffering from as a child, is his weight and also the bullying he was experiencing due to his weight. um and that problem has been solved for
Hmm.
him. um
And then the other relevant thing about young Ben is that he had this amazing sort of physical intuition, and it's like, okay, well, now
mhm.
he's like the best architect in the world. So
Yeah,
that's just also positive.
yeah,
So
yeah,
um
yeah. I mean, because you could definitely see a version of this book in which they just made Ben like super big, right? That
yeah,
like you just extrapolated out the thing he was suffering from as a child, and now that's even worse now that he's an adult, and that fits in with this whole thing we're talking about these characters kind of existing in this holding pattern in life. But then, I
mhm,
mean, the other side of this coin is this idea that something we'll get to in a moment here, that they've all been touched in some way and are living in many ways kind of a charmed version of their lives. And maybe Ben's weight loss is part of that.
yeah, possibly. um I'm trying to remember, did Ben at any point mention like having a girlfriend?
He
um
says specifically he's never really been in any kind of
yeah.
long term, like when they're talking about that none of them had kids. I think there's been women, but he's never been in
Mhm.
anything serious.
And that was kind of my where my head went when I was like, well, he lost the weight, But maybe the thing with Ben is like he still sees himself in some deep way as being the kind of man that no woman could really ever be attracted to,
Yep. Yep.
because dot dot dot, and it's like, well, he is. I think this is also very human. Is you never really update on the traumas that you experienced when you were age 8 through 11.
Yeah.
You kind of are always reacting to that, even if it no longer applies at all.
Yeah. And as a person whose weight has fluctuated throughout their life, e- even your self confidence is hurt by being bigger.
Hmm.
Um, but that doesn't like you don't lose 60 pounds and then go, oh, I'm self confident now.
Yeah.
That's not how that works. That's
Uh-huh.
not how that works at all. So yeah, no, I think there's definitely something to that.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. So with that done, the group continues drinking and eating and celebrating, and they're all having a good time. They're all kind of getting drunk. But Bill starts to realize something. He starts to realize that it is time to shift the conversation towards it and the reason they're here. And he's terrified about that. He's terrified that at any moment Mike is going to start talking, and then they're going to have to deal with this great dark evil. I love this. I love this as kind of a reflection of something we noted that Eddie did with Bill back when they were children, right? They were all sitting. It was the day that they had built the dam, and they were all sitting around. And Eddie felt this strong urge that Bill was about to open his mouth and completely change everything for them. And this is the time where he brings up the experience he had in Georgie's room, and now we see that same feeling except reversed, because it's Bill who feels this thing happening, and it's Eddie actually that speaks up first and brings the conversation towards Stan, which eventually leads towards the whole reason that they're here. Just a really interesting idea, right? That this we've kind of taken this dynamic between these two characters, and in the two different time frames flipped them.
Yeah. That's a great point. I actually totally agree that that's an intended parallel slash reversal. Um, I wonder what that means about what their attitudes are going to be like as we move into their adult section.
Yeah, I mean that's a great point, because Bill was the leader, right? Bill was the
Mhm.
one that is okay. Bill always seems to know what to do. Bill always seems to have a plan. But this, and this, and that's not the Bill we've seen so far in
Yeah.
1985.
The closest thing that we see is later in this chapter when he kind of starts barking orders and
Yeah,
people. But that's not how I think of him at this point, certainly.
yeah, you're absolutely right that in a moment of crisis he does like immediately like assume command.
Mhm.
Certainly true. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I really love this. They're talking about Stan and what happened with Stan. And we say this: people change, Eddie said. Do they? Bill asked. Stan was. He moved his hands down the tablecloth, trying to catch the right words. He was an ordered person, the kind of person who has to have his books divided up into fiction and nonfiction on his shelves, and then wants to have each section in alphabetical order. I can remember something he said once. I don't remember where we were or what we were doing, at least not yet, but I think it was towards the end of things. He said he could stand to be scared, but he hated being dirty. That seemed to me the essence of Stan. Maybe it was just too much when Mike called. He saw his choices as being only two: stay alive and get dirty, or die clean. Maybe people don't really change as much as we think. Maybe they just stiffen up. So this, more and more kind of unlocking the mystery that is Stanley Uris. I liked it also because I have two bookshelves in my house, and one of them is my fiction bookshelf,
Hmm.
and one of them is my nonfiction bookshelf. I do not alphabetize them. I do not do that. I'm not crazy, but
Uh-huh.
I definitely segment those books away from each other.
You probably did that because you wanted to be like Stanley Uris, though, right?
I mean, maybe subconsciously.
Maybe so. Maybe so. Um, yeah, I love that they talk about this about the idea of Stan. Um, I was thinking while I read this, like, hey, isn't it interesting that the losers at no point in this conversation really have that sort of uh, contention that Ben Mears and Matt Burke had in Salem's Lot, for example, where they just struggled philosophically with this basic premise of something supernatural happening at all. and those characters couldn't even bring themselves to say the word vampire. You could imagine a version of this conversation where they're like, "Oh, come now, it's impossible. There must have been some kind of mass hysteria that we were experiencing as children." She's like, "No, nothing like that happens. They all just accept it." And like I thought about it, and I was like, "Well, yeah." So like the one member of the Losers Club who would be prone to having that kind of philosophical conversation immediately slashed his wrists when confronted with the truth of the situation,
Mm-hmm.
and that's quite a statement, right? Like from a constructing the novel point of view, I think it's quite a statement to say, if you can't just kind of accept and roll with the idea that you're suddenly being swept up into Lovecraftian horror, then you don't stand a chance at all. You're just going to be wiped out immediately.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. And I think this is also part of why the book is structured the way it is. We've gotten to see all the encounters they had with Pennywise as a kid, and not just that we're seeing them, but this is per the structure of the book, them literally remembering those moments, and then finally when we get here to the reunion, there has to be no conversation about um, did this really happen? They've remembered it. They know it did.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I feel like if Stan were here somehow, he would have still managed to be like, this just doesn't make any sense. How could this be? And it's like, well, yeah, that you don't end up in this situation if you have that attitude.
No, you're
'Cause,
right. Yeah, I
yeah,
think you're so right. I think he would be the only one in this conversation where they'd be like, "Let's stop. Come on, we're not remembering things correctly." Blah blah blah. And
yeah,
and it is a statement by the book that the precise reason that that person is not here is because that's the type of person that checks out.
yeah, right,
I
cool.
love that. I'd never thought about it in that framing, but I think you're so right there.
I just think that I just keep thinking that the idea that you have this character who's almost like the most rational of them, and his choice was to just bail out at the first opportunity, is an incredibly dramatic thing to do in a book like this. Um,
Hmm.
yeah,
Yeah.
cool.
So from here, we move through Mike filling in the rest of the losers on the murders that have occurred in Derry. We learn that there have been 9 deaths, 9 children killed. It's interesting that like most of this information we already knew on some level through the interludes that we've read. Though obviously there are still some new bits here, but it doesn't ever feel like we're retreading ground and just like getting okay, like yada yada. I know this. I know this. I know this. It doesn't ever feel like that to me.
Yeah, well, it felt like stuff that appreciated having retread because it connected, reminding me of the important information that I needed to have in mind. It kind of helps to have the pieces be put back together for me.
Hmm. Hmm. One thing they discuss here, Matt, is how it's kind of insane that 9 dead kids in a main city hasn't become national news. And they're right. It's kind of ridiculous, but I think they say, well, maybe that's the way it wants it, right? Which is a fun concept of like it has such a roots in this town that it can kind of influence the way people behave and the reason why these stories don't get picked up nationally.
Yeah, sure. I think we can just take that at face value. The idea
Yeah.
that it has more of a psychic sway over the town than
Hmm.
just every once in a while causing some children to have some terrifying moments. That seems totally plausible,
Yeah.
almost required, given the way the town is portrayed in general.
Yeah. And then then we get this part that I really really like. It can't be, Beverly cried. I would have read about it in the paper, seen it on the news, when that crazy cop killed all those women in Castle Rock, Maine, and those children who were murdered in Atlanta. I love when King does this because he's mixing fiction and reality together, right? There very famously in Atlanta, there was a series of time where children were just being murdered. I don't know if they ever like found out what was happening there. By the way, it was just like this string of child murderers in Atlanta. It was crazy, but that a thing that really happened. mixed in with that crazy cop killed all those women in Castle Rock, Maine, which is from Stephen King's The Dead Zone. Um, so I love how it adds realism to the world when he like does, here's two examples. One of them is real in your world, reader, and here's one that's my fictional thing. I don't know. He does this a lot where he like will offer two examples and one of them is made up, but the other isn't.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's fun. I mean, it's horrible that the child killings actually happened, but yeah, it's
Mm-hmm.
um, I think it's I don't actually know what book the crazy cop killing all those women in Castle Rock refers to specifically.
Dead Zone.
Dead Zone. Yeah.
Do you
Okay.
remember in the Dead Zone
I
movie
do.
where Christopher Walken touches a cop and realizes that he's the murderer?
I do remember that.
That's where that's from.
There you go. All right.
So this bit here feels pretty important, Matt. So I'll read this and then we can talk about it. I've begun to think, you see, that it has been here so long, whatever it really is, that it's become a part of Derry, something as much of a part of the town as the standpipe, or the canal, or Bassey Park, or the library. Only it's not a matter of outward geography, you understand. Maybe that was true once, but now it's inside. Somehow it's gotten inside. That's the only way I know to understand all the terrible things that have happened here. The nominally explicable as well as the utterly unexplicable. There was a fire at a Negro nightclub called the Black Spot in 1930. A year before that, a bunch of half-bright Depression outlaws was gunned down on the Canal Street in the middle of the afternoon. So this is, I think, Matt, something we've been kind of talking about and ruminating on the last few weeks has been this idea of, we have all these spike in child abductions and child killings every 27 years. And those are events in the history of Derry that seem, primarily motivated and acted upon by Pennywise, by this monster. But we do have all these other things that happen, like the Black Spot, like the Kitchener Ironworks explosion, like we learn here something I don't think we had ever talked about yet. These outlaws that were gunned down on Canal Street. These are things that aren't specifically related to Pennywise. Pennywise did not cause the Black Spot to be burned down. That was a bunch of racist assholes. Pennywise did not cause the Kitchener Ironworks to explode. That was some fluke. But the argument that Mike is making here, and the argument that the book's making here, is that Pennywise has become so integral and part of this town that Derry and it and Derry are the same thing, as one of our characters said in the very first pages of this novel, that even though these things are not directly the result of his direct active influence, they are a part of him. It is what has made the town this way.
Yeah. I think the way I'm starting to see it is like it's almost unfortunate that we have these movies that have given us this sense. And again, I've never seen the movies, but my sense of the movies from the trailers is that there's this clown called Pennywise, and he's a clown. And the book is fairly clear on the idea that, like, it looks like a clown sometimes, it takes the form of a clown. It's one of the forms that it takes on when it's trying to lure children, but it's actually this Lovecraftian creature that spills outside of the boundaries of form and just takes on a presence of like psychic emanation and raw will and just evil and badness and misfortune and tragedy and just depression as a blanket over this whole city.
Mm-hmm.
And the clown is really just, again, one face that pokes out from this sort of mass, this
Sure,
this eldritch mass every once in a while. And
yeah, I like that. That's all I can say for now, but I like that.
I mean, it seems increasingly clear that something like that is correct, but we'll see.
Yeah, I think to make his point a little more clearly here, Mike compares Derry to a town in Texas where crime rates are much lower per capita than they should be. That for a town that size, it should have much higher rates of crime, and it doesn't. And this idea that, oh, there's something in the water that makes people there especially placid. And that's by the way, another fun Stephen King reference, because he wrote a short story about a person who attempts to solve the mystery of what's happening in that town.
Can you tell me which short story or is
Sure, it is
okay?
a story called "The End of the Whole Mess." It appeared in Nightmares and Dreamscapes, his early '90s collection, which is a
Oh,
massive, massive collection of short stories. It's like, gosh, it's like I feel like it's like 800 pages long. It's huge.
yeah, I think I have that book. I think that's somebody bought that for me at some point many, many years ago, and I just happened to have it. So maybe I'll read that one if I'm
Oh,
allowed
you
to.
should. You should.
Okay, cool.
Um, there's a lot of good stories in there.
Nice. All right, cool.
All right, so Mike shares a picture of something that they found with one of the more recent bodies, and Matt, it's the photo of Georgie's class that went missing from his photo album, and it was left there. It was left there to be found by the body.
Uh-huh.
And this combined with one of the most recent murders, they found in the murder victim's blood words written on a wall: "Come home, come home, come home." So these are the events that I think caused Mike to finally say, "Okay, I got I got to call now. I got to
Yeah.
call these guys. I got to pick up the phone. I've been avoiding doing this because I know it could destroy their lives and might even kill someone. Something we learned was correct. Um, but the thing this tells us is that it's not just the turtle or Mike or, you know, the white that wants them to come home and confront Pennywise again. It's it itself wants them back, right? That it's kind of beckoning them. That's why the picture was put there. That's why it writes this. It wants this confrontation as much as they do.
Yeah, which suddenly kind of makes you realize like, oh no, maybe maybe we didn't want Mike to call them back, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
maybe it just wants to finish eating them.
Yeah.
'Cause, yeah, I think it's deliciously ominous because we now understand that it's not afraid of them coming back. It just kind of wants to end this chapter of or maybe rectify its previous failure, and maybe it's totally confident that it's going to be able to.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean, this idea that we've kind of been hinted towards that it's the magicalness, the specialness, the powerfulness of childhood seems to be something that Pennywise is uniquely weak to, as we've
Mhm.
seen in the encounters that our characters have survived, and maybe they've lost a little bit of that, and so
Yep.
maybe he's a little confident.
Right.
All right, so this leads to our next conversation that the characters have, which is this idea that we're presented with here, that Pennywise has left an imprint on each of them, that their encounter with Pennywise, the one that they haven't quite remembered yet, and the one that we haven't gotten to see yet, left them changed. And that is part of the reason why their lives are so different. Like Mike says here, things are out of order with your lives too. None of you left Derry untouched without its mark on you. All of you forgot what happened here, and your memories of that summer are still only fragmentary. And then there's the passing curious fact that you're all rich. um,
Mhm.
and we also see, as they later talk about, the fact that none of them have children. Um, I wanted to talk to you about this, Matt, because I think like when you looked at this at the beginning of the novel, you were kind of like, oh, maybe this is or was like a gift or a curse of the turtle, for the what they did. But Mike here at least thinks that this is something from Pennywise specifically, and I'm just curious what you think now that we've gotten this new hypothesis on this whole thing.
Yeah, I don't know that I've sorted it out completely. Um, because I was thinking of um I, I was thinking of their lives after Derry as a kind of mix of metaphysical reward and cost. Like there
Hmm.
was a cost to their ordeal, and maybe that cost is that none of them can have children, because they touched something so profoundly evil and antithetical to life. Um, but I do love the notion that maybe their material success was also a kind of curse, a kind of um, something meant to somehow weaken them or make them comfortable, make them easier targets for when they returned. I don't know.
Hmm.
I don't have a good solid reason why that would happen, though.
No, that's really interesting. I like that. I like that a lot. Um, we'll just we don't really have an answer yet. There's not a definitive answer to this yet, but
Yeah,
it's fun to think about for sure.
cool.
Of course, the exception to this rule, Matt, is Mike himself. Right? He is not rich. He has not left Derry. I think Bill refers to him as the kind of the keeper of the lighthouse. He struggles to make ends meet and has stayed behind. And as you said, is kind of prematurely aged for it. He's not had the the. I hesitate to call it a comfortable existence because obviously, like Bev did not live a comfortable existence. Eddie does not live a comfortable existence. Like it's not super comfortable, but definitely like financially and materially comfortable.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's I again. I don't know. It's not clear, right? Because it would be one thing is if it was like, yeah, they all just had these great lives. It's like, no, that's not really true.
Hmm.
They were successful, which is a totally different statement, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it's like, well, well, what is that worth if you're not happy? Because most of them are not happy. How many of them are happy? Are any of them happy?
Um.
It- Bill, maybe.
Mm,
Like
mm,
that's I think the interesting contrast is that they're all successful and none of them are really happy.
Yeah, I mean, I think Bill loves his wife. Like, I
Mm.
legitimately, he loves Audra. I think Bill is an interesting case because I think Bill's stories, Bill's art, are an outlet for his trauma, even if he's not conscious that they are. Um, and so maybe that's why you could say he's happier. Um, but I don't know if I'd describe him as particularly happy either.
Yeah, I agree.
Um, all right, so we got to talk here about the fact that they're childless a little bit here. Like we go through this whole thing. We hear that several of the losers tried but have not succeeded in having kids. Richie tells a story of his vasectomy that managed to magically reverse itself. But also, even during that time, he thought he was shooting blanks, still childless. So I think enough to where the book is kind of saying this is supernatural a little bit here. This is not realistic. The question, though, that we have to ask ourselves is why, and I don't mean why from like a plot perspective. Like I think you're already right in your assumption that like something to do with the experience that they had, whether it was Pennywise or has tainted them in a way that they cannot have children. The why that I want to know from you, at least your best guess, is from a storytelling perspective, from a thematic perspective. Like this was a choice that King made. Why?
Yeah, I mean, okay, so there's a kind of more concrete reason that I thought of, which is basically that if they don't have children, then they can't be reminded of the power of childhood. Because I think honestly, having children kind of makes you younger. Kind of makes you kind of makes you silly, you know. Like I feel like that's one thing that having kids has done for me is I definitely laugh a lot more and act like a silly goose a lot more than I normally would in a given day, right?
Yeah.
And if you don't have kids, that part of you doesn't get to stretch its legs quite as much. And so this is one way in which Pennywise has sort of forced them all to stiffen up by denying them just the simple interaction with children that would otherwise kindle those kind of more childish aspects of their personalities. So it's just another way to reduce their I don't know threat level. This is a very like uh, practical reason why Pennywise might have done this. I mean, I can
Yeah.
think of thematically, it also makes sense to sort of disconnect them from their childhood as a way of I don't know, metaphysically showing their wound. But I don't know. I think there's something to that practical answer as well.
I like that a whole lot. And I agree with you because I like literally hours before this recording right now, I was running around the house tackling my kid
Yeah,
and cackling as he laughed about it.
yeah,
So I agree. I do think there's also like one of the things I was thinking about is like the promise itself and the phone call. Like how much would having children and being a parent have changed the equation of are you coming? Right? Are you going to fulfill your promise? Because I got to say, man, like
uh,
if it's just me and someone calls me and says, "Oh, yeah, this promise, we were 11 and you might die," I'd be like, "Yeah, okay." If I got kids, I'm like, "No,
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
sorry. I have other children that I am responsible to, other than my child, my than me." As
yeah.
a child, and the promises I made to myself as a child and to my friends as a child, I have promises I have made to my children, and those I have to prioritize those promises.
Yeah, right. So I mean, it's interesting because whether the turtle wants them back in Derry or Pennywise wants them back in Derry or both, it does seem like it would make sense to not allow them to have children to accomplish that
Hmm.
for that reason, for the reasons we just described.
Yeah, I was also broadly thinking of something else, and I your answer kind of contradicted that. I do think like I think one of the biggest changes you can go through in adulthood is becoming a parent, right?
Hmm.
Like like I can't think of something that has fundamentally changed me, and not just like changed my day-to-day life. I'm not even talking about like just the mundane physical requirements of being a parent, but just like how it rewires your brain in
Hmm.
a lot of very specific ways.
Yeah.
And I don't know, like whether it's a good thing or a bad thing that our characters didn't experience that rewiring. It remains to be seen. But I do think there is just this fundamental shift that happens when you become a parent.
Yeah, changes your self-conception, changes the way you
Yeah.
behave, changes the way you think, totally.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
and they were denied that ability to shift, which yeah, I think these are all. That's what's interesting is I really enjoy this this question because we don't have an
Hmm.
answer to it, and there are so many different ways you could view it. Right,
Hmm.
we've come up with like three different ones in this conversation. I'm sure we could come up with more if we kept going, but yeah, it's really interesting. Really like
Yeah.
this.
Yeah. Definitely. Me too. It's a lot of fun. Speaking of Richie, though, I do love that we do get to see a little bit of adult Richie here, Matt. Like we talked about it already, but I love that he does the Irish cop voice and it's perfect. Like this idea that, oh no, he's actually gotten like super good at these voices now. He's really, really good at it. He's really skilled at it. I also especially love the club remembering the beep beep stuff, although apparently you need more explicit explanations for what this stuff means.
Yeah, I need the characters to look directly at the camera and explain. It's like a Roadrunner Wile E. Coyote thing, right?
Sure.
Okay, all right,
Sure, Matt. That is exactly what it is.
that's what it is.
Could be. Could be.
Okay.
I don't understand what is left under. I mean, I guess like you're specifically looking for the word origin of the choice of
I
saying beep beep.
I think there needs to be like a prequel that explains the origin of the beep beep.
Yeah, I'm gonna be completely honest with you right now. I
Uh-huh.
legitimately do not remember if that is ever specifically explained because it never mattered to me in the slightest,
Yeah, I'm
and
just
so
being
I've
an
completely
asshole here.
forgotten it if it has.
I don't care. I'm sure that it's just a thing that they started doing to sort of tell Richie, like, okay, yep, shut up
Yeah,
now.
it's like when someone honks at you. It's like, hey,
Yeah,
beep beep. You've
yeah,
gone too far.
yeah. You've gone too far, and like we acknowledge you, but I'm not gonna react. I'm just gonna give you the beep beep, and we're gonna go on as if you didn't say anything because we can't have you derailing every conversation with your bullshit, Richie.
Yeah, it's definitely the Roadrunner thing though.
It's me. It's meep
Yeah,
meep.
I'm pretty
You
sure the
see.
Roadrunner is Meep Meep.
Yeah, that's true. Damn it.
Oh my god. So Mike says he has a plan. And before he reveals what his plan is, he wants to make sure that everyone agrees what they're here for. It's one thing. I think I wish I had copied this into the script, but it's one thing the text says that I think that's really beautiful. It's like the promise that you made brought you here, but it can't hold you here. Like, so you have to agree that this is what we're going to do and we're going to do it together. Um, Really great word usage there. I love this part as well. You have to understand that our chances of success are impossible to predict. I know they're not good, just as I know that it would have been better if Stan were here too. Still not really good, but better. With Stan gone, the circle we made that day is broken. I don't really think we can destroy it or even send it away for a little while as you did before with a broken circle. I think it will kill us, one by one, and probably in some extremely horrible ways. As children, we made a complete circle in some way I don't even understand now. I think that if we agree to go ahead, we'll have to try to form a smaller circle. I don't know if that can be done. I believe it might be possible to think we'd done it, only to discover, when it was too late, well, that it was too late. He's being very transparent, very obvious here, and again, it gets into this idea that not it's not even just missing Stan that has brought weakness to the losers. It is the weakness of adulthood that has done it.
Mhm. I also like the language around forming a circle because it's like it's
Mhm.
not just enough that they're physically back; they still need to somehow form a smaller circle,
Yep. Yep.
implying that that is a thing that has not happened yet, just because they happen to be sitting around the table together.
No, great point. Great point. So, led by Bill, they agree that they will stand against it, and then Mike lays out his plan. From the restaurant, they will separate and visit a place in Derry that they remember, a place that was important to them in their childhood, a walking tour, as he calls it. It's not really a plan, he says, so much as intuition. And that's what he talks about intuition. He says going on intuition is like picking up a beat and dancing to it. Using intuition is a hard thing for grown-ups to do, and that's the main reason I think it might be the right thing for us to do. Kids, after all, operate on it about 80% of the time, at least until they're 14 or so.
Mhm.
So what do you think of the plan here, Matt?
Um, I think it actually sounds like a fucking terrible plan. So I really hope the intuition is right because basically, we just watched Scream the other day for the Doofcast, and I seem to remember something about not splitting up in the horror movie. Um,
Yeah.
but that's the intuition. The intuition says we got to split up. We got to go to dangerous places and split up and go one by one into the dangerous places so it
Yeah,
can
but
pick
it's
us
all about
off.
circles, right? It's all about circles, Matt. And Mike has a reason for splitting up. It's because it started alone for all these people. Their first experience with it was when they were alone. And so it seems like the first experience here, again in 1985, as they're back to complete that circle, needs to also be alone.
Okay.
But, but we have one exception to this whole thing because Richie didn't have a solo it encounter experience. We didn't see him experience Pennywise in 1958. The first time he saw anything weird was in Georgie's room with Bill. But well, that's not exactly true. And we had hints of this in the past, and we see it again here. He says he was in the park one day. He laid down on a bench and he had a scary dream. And he doesn't get into what the dream was or what happened or anything, but we get enough here to say that it seems like Richie was not an exception. Actually, he did have his own Pennywise experience. He just didn't realize at the time that that's what it was. But again, this is an interesting structural choice to me.
Mhm.
We had this whole part of the novel. It was hundreds of pages that we just spent over the last few weeks talking about. And in that, every single one of our characters in the Losers Club had their chapter in which they experienced their solo encounter with Pennywise. That was, if you look back on part two, that was the main structure of part two. We have a chapter, Pennywise experience, chapter, Pennywise experience. That's how it worked. We know Richie had one, but it wasn't in that section. And that's a choice. That's a choice. Why separate his? Why remove his from the rest of them? Why make that different? I don't know. What do you think? I don't think there's a clear answer here, but it's just interesting to think about.
So I'm going to give a really non-satisfying explanation to your answer, which is the answer is pacing,
Okay.
um, which I guess is a Doyleistic answer to what sounded more like a Watsonian question. I think if we walked through each story for each kid in a kind of mechanical lockstep, where first we do this character and then we do this character, etc., the book would start to feel formulaic and slow and repetitive. And so we leave Richie aside. We deal with Richie's childhood encounters at some later point, maybe, and that allows us to not only keep the pacing a little bit livened up, but also maybe throw in a surprise late in the game that changes our expectations or adds some knowledge or information at a later point in time. Like maybe Richie's encounter involves something that we need to learn to beat Pennywise, but if we showed that previously, that would be premature. We'd get the information too early. It would screw up the pacing of the doling out of the information from the perspective of this being like a thriller. So we hold that aside. So there's structural reasons to do it that I think actually kind of supersede um in story reasons. Why? Because the in story reason is you could just say very simply like, well, Richie's kind of different from the others in certain ways, and sure, he thought it was a dream. I don't know that the in story explanation is is um is even an explanation so much as just a happenstance. I don't know.
Sure.
Does that make sense?
It does. Yeah. I like that, and the reason I'm kind of pausing here is I'm kind of trying to think back over the whole book. It does seem like any time in this book when we take the time to establish a pretty clear pattern amongst these seven characters, there is always one character that breaks the mold a little bit. Like we
Mhm.
have the six phone calls, and then the broken mold there is that the seventh is the person making the phone calls. So
Mhm.
it's not like six. We don't have his quite his chapter. We have all of our characters chapters, but then Stan doesn't get one, obviously, because he's dead. um yeah, and obviously Bev's encounter with it is very different from a lot of the other characters encounters with it. So it does feel like we're constantly trying to structurally and tonally break the mold and not have every one of the seven things be the same as the other one. So I like that idea. I like that
Yeah.
idea that this is a conscious decision to kind of, we can't be too predictable with, we can't do everything seven times in a row. We'll do it six times, but we have to do something a little different.
Yeah. Yeah, I think he's very intentionally making it so that there's no perfect patterns anywhere, actually.
Hmm. Yeah, I like it. So before they go up to go have their walking tour, they have to have their fortune cookies first. But Matt, you gotta have your fortune cookies.
Gotta have your fortune
Do,
cookies.
do you do you like fortune cookies?
Nope.
I think they're gross.
It
I
was
do not
always
like them.
it was a tradition in my family that you're not supposed to open your own fortune cookie,
Oh, okay.
and also I think they taste bad.
Yeah, I would literally just break the cookie, take the fortune out, and then throw the cookie away because it's gross.
Do you remember when we used to go to that Chinese restaurant by the dorm that we lived in?
I do. I
We
do.
would get the fortune cookies and we would like try to read deep auguries into them because we were we were 18 years old.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My son had a fortune cookie for the first time, and I don't think I've ever seen quite such specific disappointment at telling a child using the word cookie, which he knows what that means, and he knows what cookies taste like, and then putting that thing in his mouth. And
And there's a
yeah,
certain there's a certain sweetness to it, I guess.
I
Uh,
guess, yeah. I don't think he's ever said I don't like it as clearly as he said when he dropped the cookie and looked me in the eye and said I don't like it.
that's great. I love it.
But these fortune cookies are special, Matt, because inside of them is gross stuff. Because
Uh-huh.
as you mentioned at the beginning of the episode, this is when Pennywise chooses to make their presence known to the Losers Club. Everyone opens their fortune cookie, and inside they see some horrible thing. Richie sees an eye. Bill a big fly. Bev sees blood again. Eddie sees a monster cricket. I forget what's in Ben's. I forgot to write that down. But the point is, they all see things that scare them, that terrify them. And I love here that while it's true that they're all terrified, like they, as you said, they slip back into old habits, right? Bill automatically says, "Up, Pennywise is up to its old tricks again," right?
Yeah.
And it's like, oh yeah, I was thinking about this. I was writing a play, and I was thinking about the movie The Fly, and Eddie has crickets in his basement that he was thinking of. Bev is thinking about the blood after her encounter with Tom. These are like they just know automatically what he's doing, what it's doing, at
Yeah.
least.
Yeah. Yeah. But it is still interesting, like I said, at the top of the episode, that it's not really coming after them. Like, none of these things are deadly. They're just scary, and they're
Yeah.
aimed to, I guess, remind them of. I mean, I think it's pretty clear at this point that it gains power by having them be scared,
Mm.
and so I guess you could say it doesn't really matter that it's not trying to physically harm them. It's still kind of accomplishing their goal by just frightening them. Its goal by frightening them.
Sure.
So,
Sure.
um,
Yeah. I mean, I think there's some truth to that. Like, we saw the choice that Pennywise made to approach Mike Hanlon while he's sleeping in the library and just leave him a little balloon present. What was that for? Not to kill him, just
mhm,
just to scare the shit out of him.
right, and it worked too.
Mhm. I do really love the dummy up moment, right? Where Bill just says to everyone, this is as you said, the moment where he really just kind of takes command of the group again and just says, everyone dummy up and just go back to your seats, sit down at the kitchen table, pretend like nothing's wrong. It's this great moment of clearly learned behavior, right? That's this idea that we haven't even seen them do this as kids yet, but we can, in this moment, know that they've had to do this before and they've done it and they know that it works, because they just immediately fall into it.
Yeah, I love that, and I love the idea that we're seeing this dummy up thing, kind of out of order, like because we've never seen them do that before, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I think it's fun. I think it's fun.
Yeah, yeah, we didn't really talk about that much this week, but there is, like there was in the first section of the book, there is a lot here where we're like getting references to things that haven't happened yet in the past. Again, we had a bunch of things that we referenced, and then in June of 1958, we got to see a lot of those things. There's a bunch in this chapter that I didn't really want to highlight because it would feel weird to be like, and Matt, this is gonna matter. I thought that was pretty obvious that when they talk about an apocalyptic rock fight that hasn't happened yet, it's like, oh, that's going to be a thing that's going to happen to them as children.
Yeah,
But there's a bunch of that. There's a bunch of that in here again. They're really playing with that idea that King is dropping these little nuggets of things that the kids haven't experienced yet that we perhaps are going to get to actually see, if we go back to them being children again.
yeah, yeah. Cool.
So the chapter ends with them all splitting up and going their own separate ways, following the intuition plan to wherever it might lead them. And our chapter ends with, I think this, I already talked about it, but I'm going to read it again. He walked away, raising one hand briefly in farewell. The misty air felt good against his face. The walk back to town would be a long one, but that was all right. He had a lot to think about. He was glad that the reunion was over and the business had begun. Just love that. I love
Yeah,
that.
me too. It's
Time for
awesome.
business.
It's badass.
Yeah. And that ends chapter 10. And we will move next week into chapter 11, Walking Tours. This is a long chapter. It's 80 something pages, so much longer than this week's, because we are going to do a lot of walking tours, Matt. You would be correct if you assume that we're going to jump from character to character and discover their experiences in Derry.
Well, I like walking. And I like tours.
Well, good. We're doing it.
All right.
Also doing a tour of walking in Bangor in
Yeah,
June.
June.
Don't forget to fill out the survey.
The show notes.
All right, Matt, let's move to our discussion questions section. What was our question last week?
The discussion question last week was, who is your favorite female character in a predominantly male ensemble? That's some great answers.
Lots of answers to this one. Almost as if this is a common thing that happens
Yeah,
in stories a lot.
which, yeah, I think you're onto something, Scott. So Pear Jane says this question has nailed a long-standing trope that drives me up a tree. Scott alluded to this, but I want to be more explicit about it. Historically, when it comes to adventure or sci-fi fantasy quests, if there's a heroine at the center, all the cast accompanying her on her journey is or reads male. Sure, you'll get the occasional Vasquez or Newt in Aliens, but by and large, the heroine does not have women supporting her. She stands alone and is surrounded and supported by men. Alice in Wonderland, The Wizard of Oz, Labyrinth, Terminator 2, even Snow White and Little Mermaid. We see it again and again. It's as though writers want to show how much they admire women by creating one exceptional, brilliant, shining example of feminine strength, but they don't have the capacity to imagine any other women who are willing to play the role of supporting sidekick. She's either the heroine or the villain, and the rest of her world is male. So I'm hijacking this question and giving it up to the sidekicks, those who contribute to the heroine's journey and have their own personalities and backstories. Give it up for Buffy's Willow and Tara, District 7's Johanna Mason, Badass Vasquez, Barbie's Gloria, second fiddles who don't know they're not the star of the story and who fight with all they have to support the heroine. And yes, I'm a Gen Xer, and I know this has begun changing in recent years, but it's a thing. Don't at me. Peer Jane then goes on to say, while I got grumpy at the end, you might have guessed I've had this convo multiple times and am inevitably faced with some guy saying, but what about this one exception that supposedly proves everything you said is incorrect? Exceptions really do prove the rule.
That's great. That's great.
Yeah. No, I mean, it just is a pattern. Yeah.
Yeah.
And,
Oh
and
yeah.
Every once in a while, somebody writes a story where they're bucking the pattern, but that's not. Yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah, no, I think that's perfect. I loved all those answers. Yeah, God, Willow is like, I don't want to talk about Buffy again because I always do that, but Willow is like one of my favorite characters, and she's definitely like this rarefied role in this genre of storytelling where you have a badass girl, but also other women.
Uh-huh. This is other relevant women characters in the story. Yeah.
Wow, what a concept. TN Bugdoc says, lots of great ones already mentioned so far. Leia, Ripley, Sarah Connor, and Elaine among my faves. I wanted to add on Marion Ravenwood from Raiders. She could hold her own in a fight, whether bashing Nazis with torches or knife men with iron skillets. She could hold her liquor well and look stunning in a dress in the Egyptian desert. Add to that her well-timed wisecracks, and you have a terrific character. Sadly, lots of that fire was missing from her role in the latest installment. Oh, and from a 90s movie, I have to give an honorable mention to Trinity. What badass.
Of course.
Trinity's great. Yeah.
Trinity is great. Marion Ravenwood is great. It's a shame they never made any more Indiana Jones movies after Last Crusade.
Did you know?
Uh-huh.
I saw this today. The Uncharted movie, the movie based on that video game that is clearly just a ripoff of Indiana Jones. It's gonna make more money than the newest Indiana Jones movie.
I did not know that, but don't feel super surprised by it, I guess.
That's wild, though.
It is wild. It is very wild, but also they really fumbled the bag, the maximum possible amount with the Indiana Jones franchise over the last 2.5 decades, 3 decades. Yeah, they did.
I just think that the fundamental idea that they don't understand why people liked Indiana Jones in the first place. Like, we don't want to see him an old man. Like, that's not why people like Indiana Jones.
I think that even George Lucas and that other director,
Steven Spielberg,
I guess, yeah, didn't understand what people liked about Indiana Jones.
Yeah,
if we're being honest.
But I mean, but the same token, though, like, I think if we're saying like, oh, the reason people love Indiana Jones is because he's this badass that we all want to be, like, you look at The Last Crusade and you're like, that seems like a poor choice then to make it a story about him and his dad, and yet that movie works really well. So I don't know.
Yeah, well, the movie has to have heart, and also Indiana Jones is always a screw up who's getting his ass kicked. That's actually what's fun about him as a character.
Yeah,
I don't know, man. I don't know.
Well, to get back to the topic on hand, I loved Marion Ravenwood in Raiders. I think I fell in love with her in that that liquor drinking sequence is such a great introduction to a character.
Yes.
So good.
Yes, it is.
Steven Spielberg, really good at this shit.
Yes, yes. Yeah, this is what happens when somebody brings up Indiana Jones, I guess. We go on a complete tangent. All right.
Uh-huh.
Labratio77 says, gotta love Tila from Masters of the Universe. The only girl in the group of active heroes, only backed up with the sorceress who is stuck in Castle Grayskull. This is only backed up by the recent Kevin Smith helmed series that's available on Netflix that focuses on Tila and is really more her story than He-Man's. Didn't watch that, but I've heard interesting things about it.
Yeah, I don't think. I don't think I've watched that either.
I think
I feel like there was a part of me that was like, didn't we do an episode on that? But no, we didn't. I
that
was
was
thinking of
that
something
was
else.
She-Ra.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Oprah 2020 says my favorite female character in a predominantly male group is Elaine Bennis from Seinfeld. Fun fact, Matt, I've never seen Bennis written out in my life, and I would have never spelled it this way.
Me neither.
Benes. I looked
Doesn't
this up because I was shocked, but that is how it's spelled.
doesn't seem right.
It's a perfect combination of terrific writing given to an incredible actor. I cannot overstate my love for Julia Louis-Dreyfus. She's got to be just as raunchy, immature, scheming, silly, petty as the men, but did it while being undoubtedly charming. She can put asses in the seats. She's first on the dance floor. She is queen of the castle.
Yes.
Great answer. I loved Elaine so much, man.
Right.
Julia Louis-Dreyfus. Did you watch Veep at all?
No, I didn't, but I do love her.
God.
She's amazing.
So funny, man. So funny.
Yeah.
I
think yeah, go ahead.
I just feel bad that she's like hitched herself to the MCU now and just like appearing as like 5-minute shit in random MCU movies that don't give her anything to really work with. Like, I know she doesn't need the money, but
it's such a weird character that they have her playing.
Yeah.
Well, she'll always be Elaine Bennis.
I agree.
I need to rewatch that show. I haven't seen it in forever.
You're up.
Am I?
Uh-huh.
I am up. Apathetic Activist says, my thought for this answer was Lilu Dallas and her multipass. She has to prove herself to be a badass woman in a world where men think that being a man is good enough and being a tough man is that much better. The only female support she gets is the diva, who turns the movie 90 degrees with her introduction. I am sure there are better developed female characters, but she is supreme. What a fascinating movie.
Remember when our first episode of Doofcast was on Fifth Element?
I forgot that was it, but yeah, I do remember doing that episode.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Such a weird, wonderful movie.
It is. Yeah. I mean, and I think, that movie is more about, I guess, feminist issues, to speak very broadly, than most of the other stories that we're going to talk about on this list. Because that world is like a caricatured masculine world.
True.
And then the supreme being is a woman, and there's a lot of commentary there, I think.
No. Yeah, totally. Kashakus says, initially I was going to say River Tam from the Firefly series and Serenity movie, but after going over the cast in my head, the crew of Serenity is divided pretty much 50-50, so that won't work. Yeah, that's because Joss Whedon is a perfect feminist and has never done anything wrong. Moving on. But one that does, and one that I think most people forget about, is Dr. Ellie Sattler from Jurassic Park, more specifically the movie version, but as that's what's most fresh in my mind. Dr. Sattler is not just smart and attractive, but brave and capable. She's not a wilting lily, but volunteers herself to go in harm's way to find the tourist party at the Tyrannosaur paddock, and again to go with Muldoon to turn on the breakers and find Mr. Arnold while the raptors are on the loose. And when the raptors have them trapped in the office, she's side by side with Alan as they fight with the raptor for control of the door instead of tearing out her hair and wailing like a damsel in distress. This has been, Matt, a journey down all the women I fell in love with as a small child. Because Ellie Sattler was definitely one of those the first time I watched this movie.
Entirely fair. Yeah. No, that's a great, and that's I mean, there's the girl is obviously also there. But yeah, there's not a ton of female characters in that movie.
Mm-mm.
Fair enough. Yeah, cool. I agree. She's a great character. All right. T and Hypocrisy says, I'm learning to go with my first instinct on these discussion questions, and that is Mrs. Mia Wallace from Pulp Fiction. In a movie where most all the female roles are spouses or girlfriends of the strong male leads, the hysteric Honey Bunny, the infant Fabienne, the woman who exists almost entirely off screen, Bonnie, Mia Wallace is an enigmatic and complicated woman. She wields an easy, careless power over men, and she commands every room. While her story is tangentially related to the main arc, we are left wanting to know so much more. And anyone who can survive an accidental heroin overdose and that gnarly Narcan dart to the heart and end up in the evening with the semblance of composure is a badass in my book. 10 points for gnarly Narcan dart to the heart, by the way.
That's a great answer. I wouldn't have thought about Mia, but that's a really great answer.
And that's another book that's just movie that's just incredibly like male coded.
Oh yeah.
Overall, yeah.
Next we have Blue Chambray Panties. Great username. Who says, I'm going with the easy answer here and choose Leia Organa. Back in the original trilogy, in a galaxy far, far away where women might as well not exist, they could have written Leia as a one-dimensional walking cliche, an eye-candy damsel in distress, which they did to an extent. But besides that, she was also a strong, intelligent, fearless leader and a brilliant tactician. Whether facing stormtroopers, Darth Vader, or even torture, she remains resolute in her convictions and never backs down from the fighting what she believes in. She's compassionate, witty, and smart, and defies traditional gender roles and stereotypes prevalent in many male-dominated narratives. She's not just a damsel in distress or a sidekick, but a central figure actively shaping the story's events. She's a complex character with a rich background, blending political acumen, military expertise, and personal vulnerabilities. Rest in peace, Carrie Fisher. Your legacy won't be forgotten. Wonderful answer. Totally agree. It's still one of like the most important moments in cinema where Luke shows up to rescue her and her response is just so flippant and like immediately like annoyed and at everyone's incompetence around her. I loved Leia in those movies.
Yeah. I was just thinking about the fact that like up until that moment, you have seen bits and pieces of her and it's her being composed, speaking almost with like a high class accent, acting like a princess. And then as soon as Luke gets to her, she's like, what the hell is wrong with you people? And it's like a totally different person, but like it works because it's like, well, she was putting on a front in those other moments, and now she's like, actually, this is who she actually is. And it's, you know, she grabs the blaster, and yes, it's great. It's one of my favorite things about that movie, honestly.
Yep, such a great moment. Aren't you a little short to be a stormtrooper? God, what a moment.
Yeah, God. Whackamack 98 says, it's got to be Cordelia Chase from Angel and Buffy for me. Played wonderfully by Charisma Carpenter. Spoilers, by the way.
Oh no!
Do I go into spoilers, Scott, or do we just say Cordelia Chase from Angel, Buffy?
Yeah, we can't because that inevitable Buffy podcast. We can't. It'll ruin it for you.
Yeah. Well,
I mean, I think you can read this part.
Okay. She starts out as a tropey mean girl with hints of hidden depths and ends as a selfless and heroic badass. In a universe with chosen ones, prophecies, eldritch gods, and more, an ordinary human girl from California shines brightest of all. I like that.
I like that too. And once again, proving that Joss Whedon is a perfect feminist and has never made any mistakes ever. I hope people can tell I'm being facetious here, right? They can, right?
I don't know, Scott.
Last but certainly not least, we have Friedlock68, who says Sarah Connor and Ellen Ripley are two of the most notable female leads in the action sci-fi genre, and deservedly said so. Having said that, I don't think either of them would stand a chance against the diabolically cunning exploits of Elaine Bennis. once again spelled like I just wouldn't expect it. Elaine was not only the funniest character in Seinfeld, but also the most savage among her male counterparts, and I mean that in the best way possible. Between the fist-fighting Frank Costanza, ruining the Soup Nazi's livelihood, or simply letting George know that he is in fact an idiot. So many episodes ended with great Elaine moments that stuck the landing so perfectly, which is part of what makes the show so great. Big props to Julia Louis-Dreyfus for being one of the greatest comedic actors of all time.
100%. I was, with the previous question, I was actually thinking, like, who's more critical to that show, Elaine Bennis or George Costanza? Because it's definitely not Seinfeld or Kramer. And I couldn't make up my mind, but I think there's a strong case to be made that she's the funniest character. I agree.
Yeah, I agree. And clearly the algorithm agrees as well, because it selected 2 Elaine Bennis answers.
Yeah. Yep. God, she's funny. The Soup Nazi moment, the last moment where she skewers him. Man, that's timeless.
Yeah, we're both gonna go have a Seinfeld rewatch as soon as we get off this recording.
Sure.
I know that's happening now.
For sure.
It's like every time we start talking about Simpsons, I end up ending the night watching an episode of The Simpsons.
Yep.
All right, those were some great answers. Thank you, folks, so much. Also, tons of great answers we got via email or on the subreddit. So if you want to see more people's answers, more great examples of a trope that I think Pear Jane rightly pointed out is dated and probably needs to change. But that doesn't mean there can't be good characters that exist in that trope, and I think people prove that today.
Yeah, totally.
All right, what is our question for next week, Matt?
Next week, select one of your favorite characters in fiction. What would Pennywise put in their fortune cookie?
Oh, basically just asking what their greatest fear is, but that's boring. This is way more interesting.
Yeah, something
because it's got to fit in a fortune cookie.
And like, how is it gonna like emerge?
Yeah, describe it in great detail.
Yeah, exactly.
I think this will be fun. I hope you have some fun with this, folks. I think it's gonna be good.
Yeah, me too.
But that is going to do it for us this week. Next week, we will continue part 3 as we cover chapter 11, another single chapter episode, rather. Chapter 11, Walking Tours, next week. It's going to be a good one.
That's right. Remember, you can reach us via email at kingslingerspod@gmail.com, over on Twitter at kingslingerspod, and of course, the subreddit at reddit.com/r/doofmedia is the best place to answer that discussion question. And while you're clicking on things, you might as well click on over to the link that I am rapidly scrolling up to, which is doofmedia.com/Bangor survey, and fill out that survey for us. Get a chance to win a copy of Holly when it comes out, and help us figure out our scoping for our project that we're going to be doing in Bangor next year.
Yeah, we have a lot of fun, folks. This is like the most serious I've ever been when I ask you, please take the couple of minutes to fill that survey out. If you want to come, we want to know, because we need to figure out how much of everything. So I know we're trying to do this well enough in advance to where, people can make plans, and the weekend is set in stone because it was the weekend Matt and I could work with, and that's the way it happened. But we want to see y'all there. So please fill out the survey, let us know, and then we can move on from there and start planning this thing. And it's going to be, oh man, it's going to be great. It's going to be so great.
Yes, it is.
If you are not already subscribed to Kingslingers, please do so. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, Google Play, and pretty much anywhere in all of Bangor that you can listen to podcasts.
That's right. And if you like the Doofcast and you want to support us, then please consider donating at patreon.com/doofmedia.
But of course, if you cannot afford to donate, that is absolutely okay. You can help us out by sharing this podcast. You're going to be clicking on that survey, so you might as well click on a share button. I think that's how podcasts work. There's a button, right?
I mean, they should.
You can, of course, also help us out by leaving a rating and a review. This week's Spotlight review comes from Hazy Rigby, who gives us 5 stars and says, "I love this show so much. The show was such an immediate favorite that I instantly became a patron." Wow, thank you. The guys are smart, insightful, and funny, and I am always excited to listen each week. If you're a King fan or just King curious, I can promise the show won't disappoint.
Thank you.
Matt, would you describe yourself as king curious?
I definitely used to be king curious, but now I'm just full on king sexual.
I did not expect that at all. Oh my goodness. Well, that's how you know it's time to end the show. We will see you right back here next week. Please don't forget to fill out that survey. Long days and pleasant nights.
And that you have twice the number. I mean, you just set it up for me. What else was I going to say?
Look, I'm not saying it was bad. I thought it was wonderful. I just didn't expect it.